Without further ado, here is a very brief overview, just so that folks know what we're going to be covering. As a general rule, we try to keep the webinars as short and sweet as we can. We know that more information in less time suits the majority of people. There are various things that we'll just try to hit the important points, and we know that lots of you will book calls with us afterwards. We'll send a follow-up email with a link where you can book directly into our calendar. So lots of these things, please do feel free to make notes, and we can dig into the details as they apply to you personally on a one-on-one call. Overview.
What's the plan for today? What are we talking about?
So we are going to very briefly introduce ourselves, introduce our project, Pela, and the fund that we've been working on in the last few years, and now the newer fund, the second version, new and improved. Then we are going to dig into some very brief information about the Golden Visa program itself, how it works in Portugal, and how you as a potential seeker of residency can engage with it.
Then there have been a lot of changes over the last year, so I think that's going to be a part of this that a lot of people
absolutely.
are looking forward to and excited about.
Yeah, we want people to feel updated and fully informed. Then we're going to tuck into more about the title of the webinar and a really frank and detail-focused analysis of where we are, what happened in 2023, where that leaves us, and as well as we possibly can, of course, an assessment of what is likely to come up in the near future, how this affects you. And then we're going to bring in our very esteemed guest.
Yeah, I'm excited.
We're lucky to have, which is Sarah Rebelo, who is one of the founding directors of Prime Legal, I would say, fastest growing immigration law firm in Portugal. We have worked closely with Sarah since the beginning of our project, when she was actually at another company. And then we've watched her found a kind of super group team of different directors from different law firms came together to launch Prime Legal. And we're very lucky that she's donated some of her time to us and to you.
And wisdom. And that'd be great.
Indeed. So without further ado, Nathan, can I ask that you introduce yourself to the lovely viewers?
Yes, thank you. So I'm an American, as perhaps you can tell from my accent. I grew up in the middle of a cornfield. That's in Ohio, and that's my agricultural roots. Farming's been in my family for over a century now. About 4 years ago, ended up moving to Portugal, and that's when I met you, and the magic happened, and this project blossomed.
Yeah.
What's how would you describe yourself?
Well, I'm from the UK, as everybody can already hear. I have founded and run various different businesses, primarily based out of London. That's where I cut my teeth. And then latterly in real estate investment and real estate investment funds. So that's what I was doing before I moved to Portugal, which happened in 2019, just in time to catch, not to catch COVID, but to be here for the beginning of COVID. And in the meantime, we founded Pela. It's been an extremely exciting roller coaster journey, ups and downs. Ultimately, after it found its feet, we launched Pela Farmland, which we'll go and talk about in a second.
It's always fun reminiscing because it seems like a decade ago now. Since this has started. What do you remember in the beginning? What was the motivation behind this project, and maybe talk?
Origin story. So I remember. When we first met, we were talking about agriculture projects and climate. It was really all about climate. I had exited a startup. You had wrapped up a consultancy that you'd been working on, and we met and bonded over what we could do. Really, climate change is the issue of our times, of our generation. We, interestingly, having both grown up on farms, having agriculture in the blood. And I think we had, I remember us bonding over similar stories of that was definitely not what we were going to work in.
Right.
And yet here we are, life's funny thing. back around we come. And the important thing for us though was to found a project that was focused on carbon sequestration. And we had both independently reached this conclusion that soil, the greatest terrestrial carbon sink on Earth, was the great overlooked solution. I mean, of course, not overlooked by everybody, but not discussed as much as it should be. And so in various forms, we launched our startup that pivoted a couple of times and ultimately ended up blossoming into this fund. And that was what brought us to the stage of learning about golden visas. And was there a meaningful way that we could find an overlap in our mission, what we were driven to try and do, and what the needs and desires of golden visa investors were.
But and I remember at the time we were looking at the whole golden visa landscape, and everything we saw were different flavors of real estate.
Right.
And thought, wow, there's just like a big hole in the market that with a little bit of creativity, this golden visa investment could have social impact, environmental impact.
And those were sorely missing from the market before. Now, not so. This is some years ago, and the market has matured a little, and I like to think we might have had a little something to do with that, but Pela Farmland was certainly the first fund that launched with a dedication to impact, both social impact and environmental impact, and that in itself has been an extremely interesting learning journey for us. Anyway,
so I want to hear it. So we launched our the first fund, Pela Farmland. I remember the challenges in the early days of fundraising and stuff, but where did that fund end? So we've have now closed fundraising, but give me some stats on
Okay, so
Pela Farmland.
So long and exciting 2 years compressed into a few sentences. That fund ended up becoming fully subscribed. In fact, oversubscribed. We ended up closing, the fund ended up securing 35 million euros. The original target was 30 million euros. And that was really interesting because when that product launched, the market was very split on whether, do people want this or not? It was very different to what was there. And it was great to prove out the concept there. And
it struck a chord. Folks were looking for capital preservation, and nothing on the market filled that more than farmland and agriculture. So I think that was a big part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember we had a very clear hypothesis that if it was possible to introduce something to the market which was demonstrably lower risk than the products that were already out there, that would be something that would really catch wind in its sails. And agriculture and farmland as an asset class really allowed us to proceed with that hypothesis. And so that was a happy story, and led us on to Pela 2, which is the name of the current Pela fund.
Pela 2 Regenerate.
Yes, to use it.
We're creative with our names.
That's it. So this one launched late last year, Q3 last year, and was a little bit of a front runner to the new regulations, which we will dig into in much more detail in a second. But essentially, because the Pela project is not focused on real estate, when the changes of 2023 came in, that was a huge gust of wind into the sales of Pela, and we sort of went from being a relatively fringe prospect, which was sort of challenging the status quo, to being one of the central propositions in the market, because now these investments do need to be non-real estate investments. Right?
What's the target size? Where is this fund today?
Okay, so overall stats, target 100 million raise.
Okay.
Already raised 6 million with another 3 committed. So we're off to a great start. I believe Pela 2 was the first fund to onboard anybody under the new regulations. So that was great, and we've become a kind of a safe haven in the market. So we get a lot of inflows from law firms and professional introducers who need to put their name to the investment that they're recommending, right? Because they're working with these clients long term. So Pela has become a safe haven for those folks who know that we're ticking all the boxes from a regulatory perspective, and so it's strength to strength so far.
So there's new people coming to this webinar that may or may not have ever heard of Pela 2. If you describe in a few sentences, what is it exactly that this fund does?
Okay, so In many ways, it's very similar to Pela Farmland. And what I mean by that is the main thing is that these funds are capital preservation vehicles, right? So the majority of golden visa investors coming into Portugal are looking for a frictionless path, the most frictionless path possible to secure their golden visas. And in this context, friction and risk are perceived very similarly. So an investor coming into the market might think, I don't really know what's going on down this pathway. This seems like a high risk investment versus, okay, this seems very simple and reliable, low volatility and recession proof. Food is a pretty recession proof, especially at the base level, the commodity production level, because folks need to eat in good times and bad times. So Pela too, again, very much structured around that capital preservation. Why don't you explain to the viewers what kinds of returns the fund is targeting and how those returns are generated?
Yeah, so we invest in a state here called Alentejo. It's I come from the U.S. and it reminds me of Napa, Sonoma Valley, the rolling hills, the oak trees in the distance. But we invest in this area for two main reasons. The climate is conducive for high value commodities. What I mean by that is we mainly focus on olives, almonds, walnuts, and some cork. But more importantly is the water assets. In agriculture, I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, I think about water. When I go to bed, I think about water. And so we only buy land on the largest irrigation network here in Portugal that's fed by Lake Alqueva. And I just read recently, it's the largest man-made lake in Europe.
Indeed, huge reservoir. 4 years worth of water in that reservoir. So drought proof to a 4-year time span, which is a big deal in Iberia, right?
And so because we of the commodities that we invest in, because they're irrigated, it's very predictable returns on, we know the yield every year. And so that allows us to generate an annual 5% dividend. And then through the appreciation of these agriculture assets, we're able to generate an additional 15% when we liquidate everything at the end of the fund. So
those are target returns and preferred returns. So that's what gets paid out to investors before other returns. These kinds of technicalities are in our brochure in full, and we would love to.
Yeah, we can go into the details. I'm sure there's more
caught up in the weeds here. So a final thing just to touch on before we move on here is impact and how that still remains very much at the center, not only of the investment strategy, but really everything that we do within the Pela project.
Why we wake up in the morning and do all this.
Yeah, really. That's what makes it meaningful for us. Therein lies the mission. So as much as achieving a low risk investment strategy is absolutely imperative for making the machine work. Ultimately, the grand why is around serving the Portuguese population in this context. It's an interesting thing for us coming in and running a business in Portugal. Clearly, neither of us are from Portugal, and that's always front of mind for us. So that ties in nicely with our mission as well. That we're here to try and serve, and it fits nicely for us because our investment is going into actually the most underinvested parts of Portugal in the interior of the country, very low density. So to be able to take foreign golden visa money and spend that on developing industry in Portugal, where there previously wasn't a lot. The European Union has been investing a lot, and to be able to invest foreign income as well is just a wonderful thing to be able to watch the industry grow and watch businesses grow in that area. And it really is growing. The rate in fact, Portugal had the second highest GDP in the EU last year.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So
that's cool.
It's really a developing market and a very exciting place to be doing business for lots and lots of reasons.
And this is our home too.
Yeah.
And so we feel an obligation to make our home better through the work that we do.
Yeah. And actually I hear that a lot from investors that come into Pela saying things like, the reason that we're choosing this fund is because we know that our kids or our grandkids may one day call Portugal home, and frankly we want to invest into making it a better place. Yeah, as opposed to luxury high-rise
Yeah.
apartments. Nathan, let me do quick fire interview for you on the Golden Visa program. So we know some of you will know lots about the program already, so bear with us. Some will be learning from the beginning, so we'll try and give lots of information quickly here. Nathan,
Yes.
what is a Golden Visa?
The Golden Visa is the most flexible way to earn citizenship in Europe. There's lots of different ways to ultimately get citizenship. For example, if you want to move to Portugal, it's a very easy process. You can go after the D7 or D2 visa.
Sure.
It doesn't require.
But that means moving your whole life to Portugal, right?
You have to live in Portugal. That's what we're doing. And in 5 years, we can qualify for a passport.
Right.
But if you need the flexibility, if you want to continue living at home for work reasons or family reasons, the Golden Visa program is great because you only have to visit for 7 years or 7 days a year. It does require a 500,000 euro investment into an eligible fund here to qualify. Often on calls, we hear a lot of different stories, and I always like to ask, what is your motivation for doing this? Because we all have different reasons, and so I thought that would be kind of fun to explore. I want to hear about some conversations you have with investors.
Sure, yeah.
And some common responses.
So motivation wise, I put a lot of these into a single bucket because people tend to tell the same story using different words over and over again, and that's really about ensuring their freedom, which is an interesting way to put it. But we insure our cars, we insure our homes, our lives sometimes, and in some countries we insure our health. But we often don't. We often don't think about ensuring our freedom, right? The mentality of our age as well. This is where I was born, and this is where I'll always live.
Right.
But of course, now more of us move around. We are unfortunately living in more tumultuous times than we've been used to for the last 75 years or so.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks just want a plan B.
Yeah.
It's a parachute, you know. Lots of people say very openly, I don't really plan to ever use it, but to have this for myself and for some folks for their kids as well. Just gives them that option. There are, of course, lots of other sort of more cliche. We see all the cliched option. Portugal's a beautiful place, the coastline, the food, it's a very safe country. The sun is 300 days a year, all this stuff, right? So it's
wonderful.
A lovely place.
We're experiencing that.
But I wonder if it might be interesting for folks to hear from you, actually, what your experience as an American was moving to Portugal, and what are some of your favorite things about
the webinar?
I think that's more interesting for folks.
Yeah, it is. So I had never left the U.S. Moving here was the first time that I've ever lived outside the U.S. And I was in San Francisco, and really the goal was to slow life down until I met you.
Sorry about that.
And really to enjoy things. And it was really hard to imagine having a family in San Francisco because it's so expensive, schools, gun violence these days, etc. And it's been a great move. I now have a 2-year-old and another on the way. And you're treated like a celebrity here when you have kids, and it's really nice.
What do you mean by that?
Well, old ladies on the street will grab your kid in a nice way, grab your kids and like want to talk to them, and it's a really engaging community feel. The downside I find is I had a strong addiction to Amazon, same day Amazon in San Francisco, and here it's a little harder
a little slow
to buy stuff like that, but I also it's nice because I don't buy as many things.
Limiting the consumerism.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. I hope that's interesting for folks to hear some of that more personal. So just to very quickly recap what you were saying earlier about the Golden Visa. So Portugal's Golden Visa remains absolutely at the front of the line in terms of most desirable. It's because it's only 7 days a year.
Okay,
that's just a very
maximum flexibility.
Yeah, it's so I mean it's a combination of things. Ultimately, the prize, if you like, is a European Union passport.
Right.
That's any way you cut it. That's one of the most desirable passports in the world, right? You've
Yeah.
got the Schengen zone, free movement. It's an extremely stable bloc.
Yeah.
And a Portuguese passport, I don't know how much folks know about this, but a Portuguese passport, if you have a passport from any of the 27 European Union countries, it's basically like having a passport to all of them. You can live and work anywhere amongst them because of the free movement principles. So that's the prize. 7 days a year, only 500K investment. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's affordable for lots of folks.
Yeah.
And then 5 years, right? So there's bureaucracy around the 5 years. We'll go into that.
And the investment covers just the investor, or?
No, yeah, you're right. So you can have a spouse or a life partner on your application as well. Kids under 18 are automatic. You can do children over 18, or your kids over 18 as well. Yeah, you got to show they're still dependent on you. So it gets a little more complex, but essentially if they're at university or something like that, then it's all good. So folks come with their whole families.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're almost to the section that everyone's waiting for, but there are quite a few people that signed up for the webinar that just don't know how the golden visa steps happen. Can you just briefly walk us through that so everyone has the right mental model on what to think of?
So let's imagine an investor emails us today, says, I read your brochure, love it, let it go, right? So we would heavily recommend that people engage a Portuguese attorney, an immigration attorney. Sarah, who will be joining us later.
Great example of that.
Great example of that. There are a few good law firms in the market, but it really is a great idea to take some advice from people on the inside on who's good and who's not, because there are lots and lots and lots of firms, and let's just say some are more equal than others. Let's put it that way. So the first thing to do is to hire a Portuguese attorney. What they will do then is get your Portuguese tax number. That's pretty straightforward. Then you are obliged to open a Portuguese bank account. That takes about 4 weeks, right? It all happens remotely. The lawyer basically takes care of it for you. You've got to fill in some forms. So you got lawyer, tax number, bank account. You will also need to supply a clean criminal background check from your home country. So that's just something you apply for. And then you also need to onboard with, the terminology is a qualifying investment, e.g. Pela Terra 2.
Yep.
So that onboarding process is pretty straightforward. That's your 500K in there. You're going to pay some fees both to the government and to the lawyers. So you're looking at about very roughly 5% on top of your investment, give or take. It depends on your family size. But basically, that's the process. So for those who come in and really want to make it happen quickly, it can all be wrapped up in maybe 5 weeks, start to finish, including bank account.
And at the end of that 5 weeks, what's that finish line that you're describing?
Great question. So that is the moment where your lawyer on your behalf clicks apply on the key website and submits all the documentation. They will have collated it. They will have verified that your application's all perfect.
Right.
So there's not really, in practice, there's not really a risk of applying and being rejected. Your lawyer makes sure that the peg is the right shape for the.
It's very procedural. It's you have a criminal background, bad background, or you don't.
Exactly.
You can show where your funds come from, or you can't.
That's it. Yeah, you also have to show where your funds come from. That's basic KYC stuff. So then at the end of those 5 weeks, or I mean, it can be longer, of course, if you drag it out, but that's the quickest. Then your lawyer clicks apply, and then you are safe, locked in, time to exhale and think, okay, I'm in the program. Right?
So if for some reason they say no more golden visa, but you've submitted your application,
you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll go into this in a bit more detail later, but there is a clause in the Portuguese constitution which protects folks against future laws affecting people retroactively. So once that application is submitted, it's really a safe time from then on.
Okay.
For that applicant.
So on to the fun stuff, and why a lot of you are probably here today. Last year, there were a lot of changes in the Golden Visa program.
Yes.
I remember for a while, every day we would read in the news and Alex, did you see? Yeah. What's going on?
So now we can do a useful thing of taking all of those peaks and troughs and all that noise and just smooth out a quick version of the story.
Yeah.
So it's hard to look, in this instance, it's hard to look forwards without looking a little bit backwards just to understand where we are and what's the context. So I'm just going to blast a 5-minute story here of where we are. So February 2023, Prime Minister comes out and says, right, there's a new bill coming called Mais Habitação, means more housing, right? What's happened there is that the Prime Minister and his government around him they're formally recognizing the housing crisis in Portugal, prices rising, and there are 10 points within that bill to try to solve this problem, right? One of those points is golden visa. So it's not that the entire blame is being pinned on golden visa, but it is being recognized as one of the driving causes for house prices going up and the negative effect that's having on the local population, right? So by the end of 2023, October, they signed this law in.
Yep.
And all real estate, all investments that relate to housing, residency, sometimes we hear this phrase, buildings with beds,
right.
Are now out of the Golden Visa program.
So the buildings with beds are no longer an eligible investment to qualify for the Golden Visa.
Exactly. We hear this kind of rule of thumb, right?
Yeah.
We'll dig into this in a sec, but it's the spirit of this law is that they do not want golden visa investments to be directly or indirectly driving up housing prices anymore in Portugal. That has to go, right? So this is the new reality, and
more importantly, like that's one aspect of it, but it's really an incredible opportunity for Portugal having this almost fire hose of investment coming into the country.
It's incredible,
and I remember. Early on, when they were talking about closing it completely, we were talking with many folks in government, and we said, don't close it. Just point the fire hose in the direction that has more of an impact on.
That's it. And I think actually it's a useful question here. It's a useful thing to remember to ask ourselves, really. What actually is the point of a golden visa program? Why have one? Why would a government introduce a golden visa program in a country? It has to be ultimately to serve the local economy, to serve the local people, right? Otherwise, what's it for? So if in 2012 there was a housing crisis in Portugal, it made sense to introduce a golden visa program around housing. That stopped making sense some years ago. And even though the program, there are obviously things that can be improved in the processing and what have you, actually, I think the government in this instance should be applauded for taking stock, refocusing what the golden visa program is doing, what's allowed and what's not, to try to bring it back to that initial goal of enriching the economy and diversified industries and not just one, which was becoming overpriced and frankly artificially priced.
Right.
So what has actually happened so 80% of money coming into golden visa used to be going into real estate.
Direct investment. And then the other 20% was largely funds. But of the fund makeup, what was the statistic?
I don't know, 75% of the funds,
something
maybe
like
more.
that.
So even 75% of the remaining 20% was still real estate focused. So this does beg the question: well, what's happened to those players, those investments, those projects?
These are big projects, big companies here in Portugal. What's their reaction?
It's been a mix. So some had all the money they needed. They could take stock. That golden goose has stopped, but no problem. They had the momentum they needed. Others have seen the writing on the wall. I mean, the majority really have seen the writing on the wall and have either pivoted, which I would say would be the sensible thing to do, or have ended their projects for a variety of reasons, I'm sure. Then there's a minority, some of the larger companies who have simply too big to lay down in the face of this new regulation and say, okay, we accept that the game's up. And now we are seeing a sort of slightly strange transition period where
almost looking for a loophole.
I mean, the phrase wolf in sheep's clothing crops to mind. It's a situation of trying to reform what is clearly a real estate project to make it look like it has nothing to do with housing, really. So that's I think it's a kind of a 12-month period. That before this dust really settles and folks just accept the new reality that we're in.
So as an investor, I'm evaluating all these different funds, all these different products. But would you say it's a general good rule of thumb to say buildings with beds, those kind of projects?
Construction, housing, buildings with beds. This is the rule of thumb. It's not perfect. I would say hospitals would be an obvious exception to that. But essentially anything else, I mean, even hospitality, right? It's like, is it built on land next to housing that could have been used for housing? So are you taking from the housing stock by developing that project? is it going to get hauled over the coals in future? Yeah, this had an indirect effect on driving up housing prices. It's just a mess. It's way too close to the sun, if you like. So I think what people are going to be asking is, how does this affect me? How does this affect me as an investor? And there are two things that come to mind there. Number one, your golden visa investment is now much more likely to be used to really develop Portugal's economy across the board in a variety of different industries, which I would call subjectively good news. Yeah. So that's great. And then the other obvious question is there a risk? Is there a risk for investors coming in under these new rules? And the obvious answer to that is not if you abide by the rules, right? So even when you are researching, being pitched to, reading about a project, you got to ask yourself, does this pass the smell test? Even if someone's saying, well, our internal lawyer tells us that this fits in a loophole, well, great. Okay, it fits in a loophole today. Yeah. How long's that loophole going to last? And some projects, frankly, are onboarding investors into really unsafe scenarios. So I would say to friends and family and really anyone who's looking at the Golden Visa program at this stage, ask yourself, is this directly or indirectly related to the housing market? Yeah. Does this fall into line with what the government are trying to achieve with this reform, which is to decouple golden visa investing and the driving up of domestic house prices? Right. So that's your smell test.
But we have an expert to bring in.
We do,
and it's I'm excited to be able to chat with her, and she really has the intimate knowledge on everything here. Yeah. So let's bring Sarah.
Yes, Sarah, I'm requesting to unmute you. Ask to unmute. Sarah, ask to start video. Here we are. Hi.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody.
Can everyone see and hear Sarah okay?
How are you? Everything okay?
Yeah, very good. Yes, thank you so much for reserving time for us and our viewers. Yeah, lovely.
That's good.
Just before we dive in, there are lots and lots of questions coming in, and I want to assure people we are seeing them, and we're going to get to them right now with Sarah's help. So,
I'll try.
So just so everybody knows, Sarah has been very much involved in the legislative process over the last year. She's one of these people whose connections left, right, and centre, and she's always speaking on different panels, always writing articles for different publications, and she's really one of the leading experts in the field. So take your chance to ask your questions now. We're really lucky to have her here with us. And so, Sarah, thank you very much for making time.
My pleasure.
Really are grateful. Let's get the ball rolling, if we may, with a couple of questions that we've teed up, and then we're going to move on to questions that folks sent in before and questions that are coming in live now. So,
can you start by sharing a little bit about the amendments to the citizenship law?
Yes. So it was proposed by the government and already approved by the parliament. Some amendments to the citizenship law between several aspects that regards, for instance, to Sephardic Jews and connection with Portugal, in what regards with more impact or with potential more impact in the golden visa applicants, is the fact that, as everybody knows, Portugal has a RBI program, so residency by investment, and not a citizenship by investment program, which means that all the applicants, regardless of the program, they need to do 5 years residency period to have the access to citizenship. And we have a problem, as everybody is aware, of delays because of COVID, because of Ukrainian war, everything, a wave of applications that's caused a huge backlog in immigration services. And due to that, the timing to achieve citizenship was increasing because of those delays. So to recover the trust of the applicants and to try to compensate for this delay that is caused by the public services, this proposal, what says is that the clock to apply for citizenship, the 5 years will start not from the moment that you are granted with your first card, your residency card, but from the moment that you apply, which will mean that some applicants that just filed the application like 3 years ago and for some reason are still waiting, that period will count and they can access to citizenship 5 years after that starting point when they file the application.
Okay, so I'm going to try and summarize that, and you can let me know if I'm getting it right or not. So essentially, the all-important 5-year clock that we hear a lot about, that now effectively starts ticking at the moment when that original application is made, and not at the moment when the visa is granted.
The residency card, yeah. Just a technicality because visa is different from residency card.
Okay, residency card is granted.
But
okay.
Yes, that's the purpose of the amendments. And soon we will have it at least with the final wording to apply.
Lovely. Okay, so folks, this is such great news for some of investors in Pela Terra who have been in actually some of them for almost 2 years now, still waiting for the residency card. And now it turns out they're already over 2 years into their 5-year process, which is great news for them, a pleasant surprise. And then the next thing that we just wanted to mention before we launch in it is about IMA. IMA is the new formulation of CEF. Yeah, maybe I'm probably getting that wrong from a technical perspective, but basically CEF's gone away, IMA's come in. And we know that IMA took a little while to warm up and get up to full speed. But could you just give us a very brief overview of, is IMA moving now? What do we expect from them in terms of the trajectory of the backlog? And any other relevant things that have come in from IMA taking over?
Yeah. So IMA is in full force now. They replaced the Immigration Office, the CEF, in October last year. And during these periods, there were a lack of communication for sure, not only with applicants, with providers, lawyers, but also, for instance, with consulates, because they were organizing internally to see what was the situation. They were able to assess that they have around 700,000 applications pending, not only golden visa, so students, workers, entrepreneurs, high qualified employees. So all summarized, it's 700,000 they need to organize. They are reinforcing the means. They are already working on the applications, and several lawyers, several law firms this month are already receiving notifications in what regards, for instance, to golden visas. And they have told that they are now in full speed. And they issue not an official communicate, but it's what they intend to do is to organize everything and with this backlog until the summer, in order to recover all these delays that exist.
So their objective there is to chip away at that backlog between now and December to get it back down to real-time applications.
Exactly. That used to be between 3 to 6 months.
Big improvement.
Besides that, they are implementing a lot of new measures in terms of dematerializing the processes, creating new platforms for applications, which will also reduce the communication.
That's a really interesting point. Denaturalizing the process is that I heard you speaking once before about the possibility of outsourcing some parts of the processing process to happen in the home countries of the investors. Is that what you mean by that?
Eventually they will do that because the new law the new regulation has some topics about it. Also gives IMA the powers to access information for confirmation and also to have the information firsthand internally by communicating with other entities in Portugal, but also abroad. Okay, in terms of the criminal record system with other countries. For sure, it will not be workable with all the countries, but will already reduce the work and the paper trail that exists in the Immigration Office currently. So all of these are good news because not only show that the entities and the government is aware of the backlog, but also shows that they are already creating the measures and implementing the measures. Just today, it was released a new platform for family reunification, the standard applications for standard immigration programs, which also helps because in the end, if the officers have less work with paper, they have more time to deal with the applications and to make the check and to the approval. So We have great expectations for IMA. So let's see.
Good to hear some optimism about immigration.
Right.
Processing. Okay, so I also heard that that they're reverting back to the pre-COVID rules, which is where you do 1 year on your first residency card, then renew for 2 years, then renew for 2 years.
Exactly. Those rules, that is the standard rule that was in the law, 1 + 2 + 2 for all the residency cards, all the immigration programs. The main change was during the COVID period, because of the delays, to avoid people to need to come so often to the immigration office. And also, based on an administrative law that was the state budget, the government was implementing this extraordinary measure that was 2 + 2 + 2, or in some cases 2 + 3 for standard immigration programs. The state budget for 2024 does not include that exception, so this means that we will go back to 1 + 2
back to the default.
2.
Okay,
Exactly.
Got it. Great.
A few investors have asked, they're waiting for the residency card. And so because they haven't received the residency card, they haven't come for the 7 days a year requirement. Because this law may change and the time start from the application and not the residency card, how do they need to make up these missed 7 days, or how does that work?
No, it's different things. Also because everybody makes it, but it's important to say that citizenship law is one thing, immigration law is another thing, and they are separated and independent processes. The requirement of permanence in Portugal for golden visas, 7 days a year, comes from immigration law, and it's an obligation that starts when the right is granted. So when they access the first card. Before that, they don't need to comply with that because they also don't have any kind of rights. So they don't have duties. Okay. For citizenship, this proposal will say that the time to count for the 5 years will start from the application date, and has no other requirements of presence included in those amendments. So it's different things, and they should not be mixed, meaning that they do not need to comply with any kind of minimum staying in Portugal to be able to access earlier to this citizenship possibility.
Okay. So just to make sure I 100% understand, if this new start at the application law comes into effect and they haven't received their residency card for, say, 3 years, they would only be required to visit Portugal for 14 days.
In year 4 and year 5.
Year 4 and year 5.
7 days a year each.
Before they could apply for a passport. Is that a correct
summary?
According to the current wording of the proposal, yes.
Wow.
Great lawyer answer.
Let's see.
Yeah, that's lawyer speak for yes. Okay, let's see. Okay, cool. So we have got really engaged audience here. So we've got questions really flooding in. So let's
you want to do the
we want to touch on some of the ones that came in early, but let's the three of us try and
I think
make the answers quick, and then we can go through.
We respect everyone's time. We'll go quick. So there's some political questions that have also come up, and one of the big ones that I saw come from a few folks is in March. There's a new election.
Yeah.
Tell us how you think about that. How that could impact the golden visa. What should people keep in mind?
In as summarized a way as you possibly can.
Yes, so in a summarized way, at this moment, according to the last feedback the auditors are getting from the market, from some people they interview to see the trends in terms of votes, it's super tight. Okay, so we don't know if the new government will continue to be from the socialist sides and left side, or if it will be on the right sides. What this means that we don't know what will happen. The political program in terms of immigration from both sides is not yet totally released. Okay, and it can also depend on any kind of partnerships and colligations they will do with small parties. Okay. because it's a matter
because
that
it's proportional
is
representation, so they do coalitions.
exactly, and sometimes they need to do concessions in terms of the agreements they reach. This is to say that if I had to bet, this year we should stay with the legislative framework we have, but this does not mean that we don't have significant possibility of having a different framework next year, depending on who win the elections and the vision they have for immigration and for the programs associated with immigration. Also considering what is happening in the world, what is happening in Europe, and the recommendations of the European Commission on this.
So it looks from where I'm standing like there's two possible pathways forward, right? 2023 was a really tumultuous year in terms of this bill around immigration and the messages that we're sending out to international investors. Investors like predictability, stability, and all of this. We're going to do this. No, we've changed our mind. We're going to do that. It's the opposite of what investors want to hear. And unsurprisingly, we on the inside.
I apologize for my government.
No, Sarah, come on. Soon to be our government. Potentially all of these folks as well. So there is logically an extremely strong argument to be made for now we've come out the other side of that uncertainty. We finally have firm footing, and whoever it is that wins the election, they will undoubtedly be feeling the pressure from this side of the argument to say, let's just have some peace and some quiet waters in the market for a while so that people know how to operate. We are building on from some of what you were saying, Sarah. There is always a possibility that a new government comes in and declares that they're against the program and they'll close it, right?
Yes,
but just to be very, very clear about this, everybody who has their application in by the time that happens would be unaffected by that. That's protected in the Constitution. But we have said, we've known for a while that the European Commission is not a massive fan of programs like this. It's always been the case that the program, it's really a question of when, not if. I mean, it's not going to still be here in 10 years. Let's be realistic. So the point is that if the right party comes in, they might be putting pressure on to wrap it up sooner rather than later.
Or to change it in a different thing. So yes, I think there is a possibility in a short, medium term to have a significant change in this kind of programs all around Europe and particularly in Portugal, because we are just having elections in March. Which means that at this moment, what we have is a new immigration office, a new law, and a new regulation to the law that is approved and was published last week. So at this moment, we have a stable framework.
Yes.
Which means for whatever happens, will not happen in the short term. Okay. So at this moment, investors know with what they should count and what exists and what are the laws
they have certainty right now.
At this moment, is everything in place. We are not waiting for any kind of amendments, publications, approvals. That was the
situation. So you could say this would be a great time to enter the program.
This is a good time to, if you want to know more about it, know more about it. If you want to take a decision, take a decision. Important always to choose carefully your investments and only to proceed when you feel comfortable with the investor and with the providers that you have selected.
Of course.
Important also to say that due to the changes that we had, a lot of new offers are coming to the market. So it's very important to confirm that they are eligible and that they are compliant with the new law and the new regulations and the purpose of the new law and the new regulation. That is super important.
Yes. And that's why folks should hire an attorney such as yourself. So we've got
or any other colleague that is in the market and knows what happens.
Okay, we've got questions coming in fast, so I'm going to start chipping away at them so we don't form a big queue. So Sean asking lots and lots of questions. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and just go down in order and hammer some through it and give some to Sarah too. So golden visa is 500,000 euros, not $500,000. Every price you hear quoted will be in euros since we are in the Eurozone. Yes, Portugal does allow for multiple citizenships. So you do not need to give up your native citizenship to take on a Portuguese citizenship. So from Stephen, why do a GV now with a big backlog of unprocessed visas? I've heard that it can be as much as 3 years. So we're not up to 3 years yet, Stephen. And the new change in the law that means that your 5-year clock starts when you apply rather than when you receive your residency card means that actually those 3 years no longer really affect you, because even if it was, I mean, right now it's actually 2 years, not 3 years, but even if you were waiting for your residency card for 2 years, your 5-year clock is still ticking in the meantime. So actually they're now staying truer to the 5-year clock than they ever have before, really, because there was always a processing delay of some kind, and now effectively there isn't.
And Alex,
Sarah,
more than that, if you allow me, it will also have another advantage, that is, you know, the conditions that you will have to meet if you apply now, which is the kind of investment and the volume of investment. Because 2 years ago, the volume of investment for venture capital funds was 350. Now it's 500,000. So there is always a risk that will increase. Okay.
Yes.
So it's important to have that in mind also.
So again, this is a window for the first time in a while where we have absolute certainty.
A stable window, let's call it. At least
a stable window.
A stable window.
I like that.
Perfect.
I like that.
We hope.
So okay, from Becky, what is the difference if you invest directly with a fund like Pela rather than investing through another fund, which I'm not going to name just for the sake of diplomacy? So Becky, the other funding question, they are investing in buildings and construction. So, I mean, we've covered that in some depth as to why that's not a good idea. It's very much against the spirit of the law and potentially even against the letter of the law. So this might be one, Becky, that we can follow up on a call. If you care to book a call with us, we'll send out a link in a follow-up email, and we would love to spend some time with you one-on-one. But essentially, whether you choose Pela or not, our advice to everyone at this stage is really move away from things that are focusing on investing in buildings. Here's an interesting one. I have multiple passports. Which home country should I use for application?
That sounds like a very nuanced lawyer question.
I mean, basically, Sarah, am I right in saying it pretty much it doesn't matter if you're a US citizen, e.g. US tax resident, that always has an effect because of additional finance laws from the US. But basically from the others, it's okay as long as it's not a sanctioned nation, e.g. North Korea or something, right?
Exactly. The immigration office, during the analysis of the process, regardless the passport you will use, they will access information internally of all the countries that are relevant for your track record. So if you have multiple passports, they will be aware of that at some point. Eventually, to open bank accounts, in some cases for a certain kind of compliance, will be different. But most important than the passport is eventually your residency country for tax purposes, eventually. Okay, so this is to say that is a little bit of kind of irrelevant, the passport you choose. I would say that eventually US may have some kind of restrictions in terms of the banks where you open the bank account. But again, it will be relevant also depending if you are a tax resident in US. So
even if you're a tax resident in the US and you applied with, say, an Australian passport, you would still have the effects of being a US tax resident. So it doesn't really matter which passport you choose. Right? Okay, cool. Here's actually an interesting one. I heard Portugal is quite left in ideology. How are taxes compared to the US? So, I mean, at least from where I'm standing, Portugal is quite left in ideology, which has some wonderful parts and some challenging parts, as all countries. But taxes obviously are an infinitely complicated code, as they are in any country.
Especially if you're American.
But yeah, but the interesting point to seize on here is that getting a golden visa does not mean that you need to become tax resident in Portugal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Yeah. So actually, at least for the time being, it's irrelevant how the taxes here are compared.
Only when you become a resident.
Yeah. So only if you even if you then get citizenship, but you stay living where you are, it's still not relevant. It's only if you decided to really utterly
6 months or more.
Yes, if you spend more than 6 months a year in probably any country, there's probably some exceptions. Then Sarah's
Yeah.
wincing at me.
She's like, oh, don't answer that.
Freestyle on laws. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave it.
So
Point is,
basically,
you don't become
golden
tax resident in
visa,
Portugal.
Portuguese citizenship, they are irrelevant for tax purposes unless the applicant spends in Portugal more than 183 days. Okay. Or
At which
if
point
he
you might as well
declares,
have a D7 anyway, rather than a golden visa.
exactly, it's cheaper. Or if he declares that wants Portugal to be his primary tax residency. Also important, the earnings that you receive from your investment in the fund, if you are a non-tax resident, they are exempted on taxation. So this is also a positive aspect in terms of the tax perspective.
Yes, great, thank you. Interesting question here from Natalia. You mentioned that the law that guarantees no retroactive, you mentioned about a law that guarantees no retroactive application of law. Why doesn't the same guarantee apply to NHR program for people who applied for the golden visa while the old NHR regime was still in effect? This is not really a webinar about NHR, so we'll do this one really quickly. But essentially,
can I?
Go for it, please.
So for all the golden visa applicants that file their application, they can still apply for NHR until December 2024.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay.
Someone's asking for all of our...
Even if the tax authority initially refuses it, the state budget law foresees these situations, and this should be challenged. If you have a refusal, it shall be challenged, and you need to discuss the situation because it's not the fault of the application not be granted with the residency card. It's the delay caused by the immigration office, and there is a transitional period that includes this kind of situations. So those people, they can apply for NHR until December.
Okay,
great.
That's good news.
The old NHR.
Yeah, okay.
Because there is a new one in force now.
Okay. Someone asked for us to type in the full names of all the participants of the three of us. I hope I've done that correctly. So let me know if you still can't see that. Okay, what constitutes the application date? Is it when my lawyer hits the apply button or when it was reviewed and the interview date set? I think it's when the lawyer hits the apply button, right? Yeah. Okay.
According to our understanding, yes. From everything that was analyzing in the law and considering the proposal that is presented for this purpose, our understanding is that it regards to the moment that the application is filed, which, considering the background that this amendment wants to solve, it's the only way you can solve it. It counts from the beginning of the application and not only from the appointment moment.
Okay. We actually had 3 people ask that exact same question.
Yeah,
so hopefully
it must have been as we were talking about.
Yeah,
They're like, oh.
yeah. So hopefully that's that one solved. With the new citizenship law, for those who have already applied, but the GV has not yet been approved, how is the 7 days per year requirement to be calculated? I think we've covered that. You don't need to do the 7 days a year while you're still waiting for your citizenship card to residency card to arrive. Excuse me. Is the automatic renewal process still in place? It was like a COVID.
Actually, now there is a new process for renewals because with the restructuring of the immigration office, now there is a new entity that is in charge of renewals for booking purposes, although it will end at IMA. So for new renewals, I will not count with automatic renewals, which does not mean that they will not come again, but do not count with that.
For the time
at
being.
least
Okay.
as
In
general
our
rule.
window of stability, it's a no. Maxine, your question is very beautifully described with lots of detail. However, it's really personal to your situation. So if you don't mind, can we do that one by email and we'll help you out directly with that one. Excuse me. Okay, again, from Tammy, the same question. The 5 years starts at the point when the...
Oh, here's a good one. What's the difference between citizenship and permanent residency?
No, citizenship and residency.
If they don't care about voting rights, is there? Because
in practice,
help us out.
Residencies, you need to renew it Citizenship you don't need, okay?
Okay.
Which means that in the renewals, in the residency, when you need to renew, you need to comply with the requirements of the renewal. So if you are a D7, you need to show that you continue to have a passive income. If you are an entrepreneur, you need to show that you continue to have a business active in Portugal. If you are a golden visa, you need to show that you continue to have an active investment.
So you would say if you were a golden visa applicant and you instead opt for permanent residence at the end of your 5 year rather than citizenship, does permanent residence need to be renewed?
Yes, every 5 years, but not based on the any kind of investment, only for purpose of updating the card itself.
Okay.
It's like a mandatory rule, like we have citizenship, the ID cards, we need to update it every X years. So for permanent residency is the same.
Okay, great. We've spoken a lot about whether or not folks will have to do 7 days a year in Portugal while they're waiting for their residency card. What about fees? Are there government fees that they have to pay after they have their residency card that they don't have to pay in those 3 years? Does it affect the way that folks have to pay fees or not really?
No. So basically, under the golden visa, you always need to pay an analysis fee in the beginning of the process. So when your lawyer files your application, it is only considered filed, submitted when you receive, when the immigration office receives that analysis fee. And then you have a second moment when you make the significant payment for purpose of issuing the residency card. And that payment is only done when you have the formal approval of your application. After that, you only need to make payments when you are doing the renewals, and it's the same system, an analysis fee and a fee to issue the card. So during this waiting period, you don't need to do payments. You will not need to do payments for the time that you are waiting because you don't have a card.
Okay.
You make the payment, the initial payment of the analysis fee, and that's it.
So, okay, so it's actually a saving in that sense?
It is a saving.
A convenient silver lining to the delay.
The immigration
Just leave it
office
there,
also updates the taxes that you need to pay. So yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Really interesting question from Mary here, who already invested in a GV touristic renovation in March 2022. The project has already started, and now Mary is wondering whether or not it's likely the investment will not be honoured. Without knowing anything about the investment, Mary, and assuming that everything is in line as it should be, the principle with dates and changing laws is such that if it was eligible at the time, you're fine. So they don't change the rules and have them affect you retroactively. I hope that clears that one up. Is Portuguese language skill a requirement to apply for A, the golden visa, B, the passport?
Only for passports and permanent residency, not for golden visa.
And what standards? I mean, have you got your A2 yet, Nathan?
I passed my A1.
Passed your A1.
I'm getting there.
I heard
A2
that
this
Alex got his A2, so eventually we can speak a little bit of Portuguese.
Yeah, why are you speaking in English this whole time? This should be in Portuguese.
Even ahead of A2. So A2, just so for folks that don't know, A2, I think the pass mark is 50%, right? So you have to get 50% in your A2 exam, and that's kind of a chit chat at the supermarket counter standard, I would say. It's not really conversational. So the bar is, it's not nothing. You do have to study, but it's not massively high. So
it's basic level.
Yeah, it's basic level. For Murat, again, we've had this one, but Portugal does allow dual citizenship. Yes. And we are reaching the end here now. So, okay. Great question from Becky here about dependents and children. So is there an age limit? What about an adult child who's 22 and is dependent volunteering in a program in another country? So is therefore financially dependent on the parents, but not in education?
Not a full-time student.
So the requirements are cumulative, and important to say that although Portugal has different immigration programs, The only that allows reunification of adult children is the golden visa, first of all. Second, the requirements are cumulative.
Can I
If
just
they are
cut in there? Sorry, when you say reunification of adult children, in practice, what would that actually look like?
It's the investor makes his investments, and under one sole investment, he can add the spouse, the parents-in-law, the children. If they are minor, no issue. If they are more equal or more than 18 years old, they are considered adult children. And in that case, they need to comply with 3 requirements. They need to be single. They need to be economically
that means unmarried, not
unmarried. Exactly. They need to be economically dependent on the parents, and they need to be studying. Okay, not necessarily in Portugal, in any part of the world, but those 3 requirements they need to be met.
Be in education of some form.
Exactly, and they need to continue to meet these 3 criteria in the concession. So in the first card situation, and every time they renew.
Yeah.
While they are
family, must be full-time education, or part-time education is sufficient?
They need to have an enrollment in an official establishment for education for at least 1 academic year.
But it doesn't specify how many hours a week or anything like that. Okay, so there's a way through that. Okay, considering the change of the legal framework, are you still allowed to change investment vehicle brackets within real estate? So my understanding of that question is, if you were in one real estate investment and you now want to change to a different real estate investment, presumably with the continuation of a golden visa, are you allowed to do that?
So it's important to say that the law changed in October. Okay, so from October, nothing that connects with real estate directly or indirectly for new applications will be possible. The ones that were filed before are covered.
Okay, interesting. If you're over 65, do you have to pass the language test?
If you have the capacity, yes.
Okay, great. Are there any ones that were sent in before?
There were, but we've fully covered.
Okay,
and we've gone over our hour.
We definitely have.
And but one thing to just wrap this up is inevitably this conversation sparks many more questions. Indeed. And this is an ongoing conversation. So we encourage everyone to reach out through email, WhatsApp. We can schedule calls. We can put you in touch with Sarah. There'll be a recording after this so that you can watch it again. And the 3 of us would love to talk to you and help you however you need.
Yeah, we're very connected. We have all our investors and lots of folks who are considering becoming investors chit-chatting on WhatsApp all the time. So email works, WhatsApp works. Time zones, of course, are something that has to be considered. But we would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for your questions. We've done a few of these, and this has been a very active audience, which is really nice.
And Sarah, thank you. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. Every time I talk to you, I learn a lot more, and it's really appreciated. And
thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And again, congratulations for being the pioneers of this kind of funds. And congratulations for being with your second fund already. And all the best for the next investments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Much appreciated. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a lovely day.